Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can all see and hear me okay. There is a chat function. If it's not showing up on the right-hand side of your screen, there is just a chat icon that you can click on to open that one up. If you want to type in there that you can see and hear me okay, that would be great. I think I'm starting to see some of you now, but I think my internet might be lagging quite a lot. But we might get started just while I wait for everyone to show up on my screen. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this important webinar or Q&A. We are recording this session, and we will send out a link to everybody in the next couple of days. So if you do miss a part of it or you want to rewatch any of it, you are obviously welcome to do that. My name is Summer. I'm one of the Member Services and Communications Coordinators for MPAQ. And today I will be helping to moderate the session. As I said, if you want to get involved with the other people that are watching the session today, you can access the live chat and you can pop any comments or questions into there and we can keep an eye out on those. So today I'm joined by Penny Corner, the MPAQ Executive Director. We're also joined by Brett Bassett, the QBCC Commissioner, and Kate Raymond, the QBCC Assistant Commissioner for Service Trades and Regulatory. Penny, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Great, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, Summer. And I'd just like to acknowledge Kent Vickers, our President for Master Plumbers. Thank you, Kent, for making the time to join with us today. Thank you also to Brett and Kate. We know how busy your schedules are and we really appreciate that you've taken the time to be with us here today and to answer some of the questions. We've had the ability where members have sent questions in prior, which is fabulous. So we're going to obviously talk through those today and then any other questions that come through. And obviously if we don't have time for all the questions, don't panic. We will reach out to QBCC so that we can provide a response and can send that out in the thank you email following. The Master Plumbers Association has been advocating for a number of things during COVID-19, specifically around obviously plumbing and gas fitting being an essential service, which obviously it is around protecting the health and safety of our community here. We've also been working very closely with the QBCC. We're part of the Ministerial Construction Council, which is a group of industry associations and unions made up to come together to talk about issues that impact the building and construction industry. And obviously at the moment, the focus for that committee is around COVID-19. There's also a further subcommittee, which is looking at further regulatory or the regulatory approach that the QBCC is taking during the COVID-19 period. And Brett or Kate may want to touch on that shortly. That's about all from me. I'm going to hand back over to Summer now.
Thanks, Penny. Before we get started on the questions, Brett, Kate, thank you for joining us. Did either of you guys want to give a bit of an update on the QBCC at the moment?
Thank you, Summer. It's Brett here. Before I start, I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands upon which we meet across this video conference and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge both Kent and Penny and thank everybody for the introduction to come and speak with you today. I'll just talk for a little bit and then I'll hand over to Kate and Kate will talk for a little bit and then we'll go to the questions. So I've been the Commissioner of the QBCC since May 2016 and I think it's fair to say that in that time you will have seen, as much as we have, a number of substantial reforms being implemented by the QBCC into the plumbing and drainage sector. You will also know more than us probably the significant impact that COVID-19 is having in respect of the accompanying self-isolation. And it's really hit home to me the importance of protecting and maintaining public health and safety across Queensland. Out of all of our licensed classes, I think it's fair to say that it's the plumbers, drainers and gas fitters who really are often at the front line of maintaining health and safety. And in that vein, I think I just wanted to talk about the fact that in April this year, we issued a public warning about the installation of so-called do-it-yourself alternative toileting devices such as bidets. That's DIY as in do-it-yourself, but as you know, and as we try and keep regulating, no one should be installing these devices except the people who are licensed and importantly trained to do so. Raising awareness about potential health issues like these is at the QBCC one of our most important roles. But the thing that is probably best known about the QBCC is our regulatory activities. And with that in mind, I just wanted to give you an exclusive preview of our regulatory strategy for the next 4 years. And this is important because it's where we will be focusing moving forward. And we will, of course, focus on 4 identified risks. Those are protecting people from physical or financial harm. Building quality and control, where we're ensuring that people are protected against non-compliant, unsafe and unfit buildings. Product integrity, where we're ensuring that we're all protected against unsafe or non-conforming building products. And of course, building industry fairness, where it's about making sure that our licensees and the broader industry are protected against financial harm in their work environment. Our view is that these 4 goals will help us prioritise our efforts and resources, and importantly, it's important that we do inform you, the industry, about our regulatory process and our focus. Since I became Commissioner, for those of you that have heard me speak, you will know that I've stressed the need for the QBCC to become a more data-driven organisation. And we think we've taken some giant strides towards that goal, and Kate and I will talk about those later on. A number of significant projects are underway in this space, including using technology to try and help us protect subcontractors and small companies from the effects of company insolvencies. As I said, we will reveal more on this subject in the near future, but for now, thank you for your time, and I will hand over to Kate, our Assistant Commissioner, Service Trades and Regulatory. Kate.
Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone. So Brett's just touched on the QBCC's regulatory strategy, and I'd like to take the opportunity to share some specific examples of plumbing compliance activities that have been undertaken by the QBCC in recent months. Alongside our usual compliance investigations and audits, we've begun work to focus our efforts on reducing unlicensed work in the plumbing industry. Also, in December 2019 and January this year, the QBCC provided some plumbing compliance signage for display in store at Queensland's leading retailers of plumbing and DIY products. And you may have seen signs that look a little bit like this around the likes of Bunnings and Mitre 10, Reece, etc. And some of those stores have created their own signage since then, which we're really excited about. The notices are targeted at both industry and consumers with their aim to increase public awareness of plumbing licensing and Form 4 requirements. Similar notices will also be provided to smaller retailers and local governments in coming months. We're also taking a focus on the 5 most common plumbing and drainage defect areas. So those are water heater installations, so issues involving insulation, drain lines and maximum delivery temperatures, overflow relief gully installation requirements, that's the height from the lowest fixture and the surrounding ground level, permit work that's being performed under notifiable work provisions, compliance with testable backflow prevention device installations, and plans for plumbing and drainage work and diagrams for notifiable work. I'd encourage you all to keep an eye out in coming months for QBCC webinars and tutorials on these common areas of defective work. In regards to notifiable work, I'm pleased to report that more than 5,000 forms have been registered so far this financial year than at the same time last financial year. So that's fantastic work by the industry in getting those Form 4s and 4As in. The QBCC partners with local government to audit compliance of notifiable work across Queensland. Through this partnership, inspections of notifiable work are conducted to check that work complies with relevant codes and standards. Approximately 94% of the population of Queensland is covered by a local government undertaking inspections of notifiable work under one of these agreements. The QBCC also monitors compliance with notifiable work registration and has undertaken more than 500 audits this year to ensure notifiable work is being identified and registered through the issuing of Form 4s and 4As. This includes audits of sales of hot water heaters to ensure these Form 4s are submitted. Finally, I'd like to make mention of the Service Trades Council, the independent advisory body providing a voice for the service trades. The STC has a statutory role under the Plumbing and Drainage Act. It was created in 2016 to promote and enhance the QBCC's licensing of plumbing and drainage work and related fire protection and mechanical services work. The STC continues to advocate for the service trades and to support the QBCC in matters such as licensing frameworks, policy development and education activities. The STC has also established 2 panels, being the Complex Licensing Panel and the On-Site Sewage Treatment Panel, that assist the STC by providing advice and recommendations on important matters relevant to the service trades and the broader community. We're very grateful to Penny Corner for taking on the role as the current chair of the STC and for industry and government support in nominating members for the council and its panels. So thank you, and I'll hand back to you, Penny.
Great, thanks Kate, thanks Brett. Thanks for providing a summary of some of the key things that QBCC is focused on. All right, we might hand over to Summer, and you might want to start with the first question, Summer.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Penny. And thank you, Brett and Kate. So just to give a bit of an overview on how we're going to run today's session. So we had quite a lot of questions submitted to us prior to today by members reaching out to us, and just when they registered as well. And because we only have a really limited amount of time, we're just going to run through those questions, and then we'll see how we go for time. So first question, and I suppose I'll just address them to both you, Brett and Kate, and then whoever is best placed to answer it can obviously jump in.
It will always be Kate.
Always Kate. Okay, got it. So first up, so June wanted to know what's an easy way to report non-compliant works to QBCC. So she did provide a bit of an example. So Paddy, their plumber, attended a house the other day where a hot water unit had been installed with no CWE valve, provision for overflow drainage, tempering valve, etc. The owner said it had only been done 5 years ago, and so they expect that no Form 4 was ever lodged. So I suppose what is an easy way for them to be reporting these kind of non-compliant works?
Thanks, Summer. So complaints of potential offences and non-compliant work can be made through a number of channels, through a contact centre, through an online form that's quite easy. We also have a specific email address just for non-compliant plumbing work, which is plumbingcomplaints@qbcc.qld.gov.au. So specifically for plumbing complaints. We do take a risk-based approach to investigating our complaints. The more information that's able to be provided in a complaint does assist in our assessment of the complaint and where that's going to be then allocated within the organisation for further investigation. Every complaint received provides valuable information to us, and even if it's something that is not investigated further for various reasons, we will retain that information and we'll retain it against the alleged offender as well. And that's useful information when we're assessing further complaints that may come in. With the Form 4s, as I said in my introductory words, we also do audits, proactive audits of those forms to see that work that's been done that's notifiable work has in fact had a Form 4 submitted with it. And depending on the nature of what we find through the audit will depend on the action we take, whether it goes from a warning to a penalty infringement notice, for example, or beyond. I'll just take the opportunity as well while we're talking about compliance, just some general statistics for those on the webinar today. This financial year to date, there's across the board, so not just plumbing, but all compliance matters across the board, 781 penalty infringement notices have been issued, and that's throughout the state, 4 disciplinary actions, 11 prosecutions finalised by way of sentence hearing, and 2 recent prosecution decisions where the judge ordered over $30,000 in fines in each matter, and a compensation order as well of approximately $20,000. Thanks for that question.
Oh. And I suppose following on from what you were just talking about, David raised a question about what the QBCC are doing to go after those unlicensed people doing plumbing and gas fitting, as well as licensed plumbers and gas fitters who are carrying out work without providing the Form 4s and the gas plates, etc. And I suppose a follow-on from that is things like social media, advertising on social media, or Airtasker, apps like that. Could you talk a little bit about what the QBCC is doing to...
Yeah, I might get Brett to talk about the social media aspect.
So it's a great question. So, there is a significant amount of people who are advertising on social media, etc. And I think it's fair to say that at a very pragmatic level, us going around and actually potentially stumbling across these people out on work sites is probably not the best use of our time. So what we need to do is we need to take a more effective approach to actually dealing with people who are doing the wrong thing. And that comes to us being a data-driven regulator. Kate will talk, no doubt, as part of her response about a novel approach that we're going to take. But it's fair to say that we need to ensure that when we are doing this type of work, that we're actually getting the best bang for our buck. I'm going to hand over to Kate and he'll talk about how we do that, and in particular, a new program of work that we've got upcoming.
Yeah, so thanks, Brett. Using data and technology to locate unlicensed work is really critical, and we're working on we have a tool that will allow us to go through these online sites to ascertain through various fields that we can put into this tool to actually ascertain bulk loads of unlicensed and unlawful advertising, which is really exciting for us. So we are going to be focusing and targeting unlicensed contracting and unlawful advertising in the coming year. And just to give an idea, we did a manual test. So before the tool was actually developed, we did a manual test run of the types of data that we'll obtain from it. And through that, we identified 116 cases of breach of advertising legislation. Now, most of those were actually licensed people who didn't have their QBCC license number on the ad, which is a requirement. So we gave a warning to those so that they can then fix that up and get that going. We will re-audit as well to make sure that has been done. 47 were referred for further investigation on suspicion of unlicensed activity. So that gives you an indicator of the sorts of numbers that we're going to be starting to get through and the compliance activity we will be able to take, which is a really exciting time to be regulating the industry when we have these tools available to us. Just going on, I think the second part of the question was about Form 4s and gas plates. So in terms of gas fitters failing to provide a gas plate, that isn't QBCC's jurisdiction. So that particular issue should be directed to the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy, who regulate that particular work, that gas plate work. The lodgement of Form 4s, our audits do detect a fairly low level of non-compliance, which is great. Where a licensee has had just one or two failures of a Form 4, we may issue a warning in that instance. We may educate, and it might have just been an error of paperwork in that instance. But where there's a high level of non-compliance by a licensee for not putting in their Form 4s, then we'll send that for further investigation and potential PIN or prosecution, depending on the nature of the activity.
So just on that one, Kate, some members say to us, I've been audited 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, etc., since it's been in since 2012. Just wondering, is there a lot of the times people say, why are they targeting me, the good people? I'm putting in all my forms, but I'm getting audited. What about all those people that aren't putting in the forms? How do you target those people, and how do you are aware, I suppose, of those people that are doing the wrong thing?
Thanks, Penny. Look, they are random audits. If there's an issue that's found during a random audit, we will follow that up with a subsequent audit. And I'm not suggesting that your members or the people in this instance necessarily have had an issue. It may have been that they've randomly been selected more than once. Yeah. But we do it randomly, specifically so that we can make sure that people are continuing to put those Form 4s in and know that those audits can happen, because that compliance is important.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that was some really good questions. We'll just add in another question here from Sarah. We are aware of an unlicensed contractor who is also not making payments to workers and has been reported by these people for both non-payment and being unlicensed. However, they are still operating. What is being done to stop these people?
Penny, I'll take that. Look, if we receive a complaint of someone who's unlicensed and not paying people, that is something we take very seriously. I'm very happy to receive those details offline and separately if the person feels that perhaps nothing has been done about it. I would caution, just say, when we do receive complaints and investigate them, it's very common that we won't actually provide the outcome of that investigation to the complainant. We do have privacy and confidentiality obligations for those that we are investigating. So it's very possible that we've taken some action and the person who complained is unaware. But if that person is continuing to operate, they're unlicensed, they're not paying, we want to hear about that. We want to take action against those people. They're the people we don't want to see continuing to operate if they're ripping people off. So on the not paying, if they're not paying subcontractors, suppliers, for undisputed debts, we have a monies owed complaint process. So if you're a subby or a supplier to a licensee, they owe you money, you can submit a monies owed complaint form to the QBCC. Our licensing team will then look at that. If it's what we call an undisputed debt, we'll then approach the person and potentially suspend the licence if that amount is not paid. And to give you an idea, in the last month, we recovered over $1 million of amounts complained of as owing. We recovered those amounts. They were paid to subcontractors and suppliers just in the last month. So, so that's a great tool for those who are owed money. If it's a disputed debt, so the licensee disputes that it's owing, we would encourage people to consider an adjudication application, and they can contact our adjudication registry for information and advice on that process.
And I think it's important to note, Penny, I might just jump in there. If somebody's unlicensed, we can't take their licence away from them. So that's one of the key regulatory steps that we take as part of the monies owed complaint. If it's not a disputed debt and somebody isn't paying the money that's owed, then we can potentially take their licence away from them. That's obviously difficult if somebody is unlicensed. The key thing from an unlicensed perspective is the Queensland government brought in some new laws a couple of years ago. In effect, it's a 3-strike rule. If you get done for unlicensed contracting over a period of time, at the third level, you could be subject of criminal proceedings, including potentially going to jail for 12 months. So what we're focused on is ensuring that, number one, people get licensed, because if they're licensed, we actually have a hook into them in respect of actually getting them to do things that they by law should be already doing. And the second thing is, we need, as Kate said, we need people to tell us where the people aren't doing the right thing, because we can't be everywhere at the one time, and we need the sector to help us.
Yeah, sure. Great, thank you. Okay, Bill wants to know, and I know, Kate, you touched on it earlier, but how many Form 4s were received by the QBCC last year? I know you touched on, I think you said 5,000 up to this current period.
So it was 5,000 more. So the Form 4...
Oh, 5,000 more, sorry.
Yeah, so let's look at the calendar year. So Form 4s lodged in 2019. That would be 37,716, is that correct? I'm looking at someone else who's sitting in the room with me, make sure I got my right number. So 37,716 in the calendar year of 2019. And to give you an idea, calendar year to date of 2020, we've got 43,015, so that's a huge increase.
Yeah, okay, great. And
Penny, can I just jump in there? I'm just looking at some of the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Some people are raising concerns about the fact that we're only auditing Form 4s, plumbers who lodge Form 4s. Well, number one, we can't audit somebody who doesn't lodge a Form 4 if we actually don't know that they're doing the work. So I think that's a really important thing here. One of the key things that we need to do is we need to make sure that people lodge Form 4s. When they lodge the Form 4s, then we absolutely should be auditing those people who lodge. But once again, if somebody is not lodging a Form 4, we need people to tell us if they're doing the work and they're not lodging those Form 4s, because once again, we simply can't be everywhere at the one time.
I think maybe what they're trying to say, and I've been looking at some of the questions coming through on the chat. I think it's more like, if you've got the list of licensees and you know that there's 8,000 plumbing contracting businesses out there, and you can see that 3,000 of them are lodging Form 4s on a fairly regular or consistent basis, how do you go about approaching those people that aren't lodging the Form 4s to make sure, or to take action against those people, as opposed to the comments on here, June saying, why are you targeting those people that are actually putting in the Form 4s?
Do you want to?
Yeah, look, we're not trying to target. Certainly, we're not trying to target anyone who's putting in the Form 4s. We do the random audit because the Form 4s are only for the notifiable work. So it could be that that a number of licensees are just not doing. They're doing permit work potentially and not doing notifiable work, or there could be a lot of reasons for that. So that's why we've gone with the random audits. But look, it is something that we're constantly having a look at how we can improve how we audit, and certainly the unlicensed contracting with our insights and technology that is being developed. You know, we are very positive that we're going to be making a bigger imprint this coming operational financial year.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Kate. Maybe something that we can look into further around the random audits for notifiable work. The follow-on question to that was, how many audits did the local government plumbing inspectors conduct? And did the information on defects come back to QBCC? And obviously at the beginning of the conversation, you talked around the top 5 defects. So was that driven by the local council's feedback, or was that driven by what the QBCC in terms of the data that you guys have?
A bit of both. That the top 5 defects is based on our data, but obviously the local governments do give us some data as well. So in terms of local government inspections in the 2019 calendar year, 1,103. 2020, so current calendar year to date, 1,714 inspections. So a big increase by local government of local government inspections there. So I sort of touched on in my introductory words that we do partner in monitoring compliance with notifiable work. Both the QBCC and local governments have a regulatory role under the Plumbing and Drainage Act. So the local governments are inspecting notifiable work and checking for compliance. We have held seminars in Cairns and Brisbane as well for local government plumbing inspectorates from across Queensland. And one of the outcomes of those seminars was the creation of a process for local governments to provide information to the QBCC about defective work and suspected unlicensed work. So we're working much closer with local governments now than we ever have been.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Kate. The next one has come through from a member, wants to know, when is the Queensland Government and the QBCC going to get serious about holding builders and construction companies accountable for ripping off subcontractors? I'm not sure if you wanted to take this one, Brett.
Yeah, I might start that one. So look, I can't speak for Queensland Government, but what I can certainly tell you is that under the security of payment reforms and the building industry fairness reforms that Minister de Brenny has put through Parliament, we at the QBCC have got significantly stronger regulatory powers. The clearest example of that is minimum financial requirements. You know, up until a couple of years ago, there was no requirement for every licensee to actually lodge down their annual reports. That hadn't been in existence for a period of time. Now that's important because if the QBCC doesn't have that data, we actually can't identify which licensees are and are not meeting minimum financial requirements. So that's the first thing I'll say. In respect of us making sure that we are holding builders and construction companies accountable. Since I've been in the chair, I've had a view that those at the top end of the supply chain, namely the biggest builders, should be held to account, because if one of those builders goes down or has financial distress, that will have a significant ripple in the market. And if we look at some clear data, as a result of our work, particularly at the category 4 to 7 end, over the last 18 months, we've seen over $1.2 billion getting put back into the balance sheets of those at the big end of town. And that's a direct result not only of the law reform that the Queensland Parliament has given us, but also the work that Kate and her team have been doing in respect of actually going and making sure that those people are held to account. So that's the first thing I'd say. In respect of holding subcontractors to account, sorry, not holding subcontractors, but making sure that subbies don't get ripped off. Kate made reference to the Money's Owed program of work before. So that's a free program of work. Over the last 5 years, we've seen over $25 million go back to people who are owed money through the Money's Owed program of work. If we also look at some current financial data, in the current financial year up until the end of May, we'd suspended 140 licensees and cancelled 55 licensees for failing to meet licence conditions as a result of actually not paying debts when they should be paid. There's some stats that show that we are actually holding builders and construction companies accountable for ripping off subcontractors. But it's important as well that people tell us when they're not getting paid. And that is one really difficult thing I know for those in the sector. They are concerned that if they put their head up and tell the QBCC that they may not get the next job. That's why we're actually in the process of finalising a new early warning detection system that we've put in place. And the reason that we're doing that is we won't necessarily need people to come and tell us that they're not getting paid. We're going to be using a whole lot of external data, including credit scoring data, to actually identify those companies that are starting to blow out their trading terms. We're going to be identifying licensees who are having trouble getting credit through banks, etc. And we'll actually be doing some proactive audits of that. Now, we've done some trials of this program of work, and where we've done these trials, we've identified that we would have been able to see elements of financial distress 12 months earlier than if we actually had this program in place. So there's some clear examples.
Yeah, agreed. I think a lot of the time subcontractors, as you said, don't want to come forward and dob in the builder because they're worried about the next job coming through. So proactive audits, definitely something that we'd be very supportive of. All right, I'll go to the next question. The next question comes from James, who wants to know about net tangible assets. Why do I, as a plumber, have to have so much money tied up with net tangible assets when my competitors in the solar hot water industry are business owners and are not plumbers, therefore not requiring net tangible assets to run their business? I understand for builders it is necessary to provide some customer protection if they go broke, but I don't even take a deposit off my customers before completing the solar hot water installation. So just wondered if you could provide any feedback on that.
So the law is the way that the law is written, and it would be inappropriate of me to comment about why one group of people or licensees had to do it compared to another one. That really is a matter for government. So it's not appropriate for me to get involved in those type of conversations. But the licensees that we regulate are required to have sufficient assets to cover the turnover that they're generating. And depending on the category of licensee, then obviously the net tangible assets will vary depending on that. The assets can be used, as you will probably know, around plant and equipment, registered motor vehicles, tools of trade, etc. The requirements to hold this net tangible assets is, as the person asking the question has outlined, to ensure that the job gets completed. You know, the QBCC has a role in making sure not only that people comply with the law, but that we proactively identify those who are at greatest risk of tracking towards financial distress. A lot of the time, we have to rely on what people tell us as part of their financial lodgements. And I know that there's commentary on the right-hand side of the screen about Cullen and what people have been told at a creditors meeting, etc. Oftentimes, the QBCC doesn't know that there's a financial issue until after that financial issue has arisen, and that is because we rely on what people tell us. That's why we need to use a whole lot more data to actually be proactive in respect of what we are doing and how we are doing it. So getting back to the basic question, why does a plumber have to have money tied up in NTA? It's because the law requires it, and our role is to ensure that we regulate the law as it's written.
Can I take the opportunity as well to just plug annual reporting, if I could? So last year was the first year of annual reporting for licensees. The date was 31 December 2019 by which to provide annual reporting information. 75% of our licensees have lodged their annual reporting information, which is great, but we've still got to get the rest of our licensees over the line, largely in SC1 and SC2 category. It's quick and easy. It can be done online. If you're in a category SC1 to category 3, you have until 31 December to meet the working capital requirements of the minimum financial requirements. The requirement to lodge is there so that the information is in the system, and we can work with you. We can let you know if you're not meeting, where the gaps are, give you an opportunity, because annual reporting will come around again, and everyone will need to report again. So you're best to, if you haven't reported, we really encourage you best to report now. we also don't want to see people have action taken against them, like conditions of no new work on their licence, because they haven't reported. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. That pretty much answers one of the next question, which was just around how many people have completed, and will you be investigating those people that are in the wrong category?
Yeah, so people who are in, say, a category 1, but their turnover in fact is, say, 50 million, yeah, when we see that, and we do have various data points to see that, we will require an MFR report. We do take a risk-based approach, so we're starting at the top, working our way down. So focus on the big builders and working our way down as we go through the assessments. So the bigger the turnover, the higher the risk.
And not only that, we certainly have, sorry Penny, we certainly have the ability, and Ian Grant and his team did this probably 18 months ago, to do an audit of breaches of maximum revenue. And as Kate has said, one of the things that we can do is we can require people to either move down or move up a category of licence based on their revenue. Now, we actually have the ability to do proactive audits of that, and we have done that. And that's something that we will continue to do to make sure that people are operating within the max revenue class that they should be.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Another question that's come in, have audits been ramped up during COVID-19? It's more of a statement, but some licensees say that they've experienced more requests for audits and information from QBCC during this time.
Oh, I think the answer there is
No.
Probably not.
Business as usual.
Business as usual.
Yeah.
What we've certainly seen is that we're starting to see, a lot of categories that haven't been required to lodge annual reporting, as Kate has said. We've seen those people start to come in, and so what we're doing now is we're actually analysing that data, and where people are potentially not meeting MFR, we're certainly starting to have engagement with them. But it is business as usual in respect of our MFR work at the moment.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got another question here before we might go through to some of the questions on the chat. David wants to know, I'm going off the tools later in the year and I have appointed someone to oversee the works. Does this person require a nominee supervisor license? He goes into a little bit more detail. I have recently started an electrical business. I'm the sole director of both the electrical and plumbing, separate companies. Do I need an additional QBCC license to cross-bill as many instances it is in the best interest of a client to receive one bill? That is to say, if I have to replace a water heater, I can engage our own electrical company to bill my plumbing company for work and put it on the plumbing invoice. This is especially the case with commercial and government premises, where it saves issuing of multiple work orders and they almost always request it. It's quite a lengthy question. I don't know if you've got any comments on that one.
So just in relation to that nominee question, so licensed contractors must ensure the work the work carried out under their licence is personally supervised by an individual who holds an appropriate licence. So company licensees must have a nominee licence. So that's the first part of that. Just further on the supervision piece, you can supervise work within the scope of your licence. People who can personally supervise plumbing work have to hold a licence to do so. In the example in the question, they'll only need to hold a nominee licence if it's intended they'll be appointed as a nominee of the company, if that makes sense. So they have to be a nominee of the company licensee. So they can be a nominee if they hold a contractor class of licence, for example, or a nominee class of licence. That makes sense. There's some more information on the website there about that if need be. In relation to the cross-billing, I can't provide specific advice about that, but if you're contracting to carry out work, you must be licensed to carry out the work within the scope of the contract, I think is the key. So if you're subcontracting part of the work, if part of the work's electrical and part is plumbing, then the electrical part should be contracted to the electrical licensee and the plumbing part plumbing licensee ideally. But specific instances if someone's got a specific question, I really encourage them to just call our contact centre, and it can then be referred on to someone with even more information who can talk through their specific circumstances.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kate. All right, we might go to the chat. We've got some questions that have come through. So June said, I've still noticed wording on the commercial Form 4 drop-downs have not been fixed on the QBCC website. Maybe that's something we can take offline and have a look at.
Yeah, we'll do that, Penny. Thank you, June.
Yep. And June's also said, would it not make sense to start with auditing? We've talked about that already. We've talked a little bit about the Form 4s and the audit process in a little bit more detail. Melissa's asked, how do you track the turnover for trades to make sure they are submitting correct figures for turnover?
Well, I mean, obviously annual reporting is a really important part of that. And we, as I said, we certainly do proactive audits. Kate, anything else you wanted to jump in with?
So when we receive the information in the annual reporting, we'll have a look at that, and then if we think we need more information, we'll go and ask for it. There are obligations to report to us when you go over or under your revenue by certain amounts. So I believe it's 20%, 20% of your max revenue. You have to let us know.
And we also get intelligence from across the sector, and you know, we actually have very good, our ears to the ground quite often, and what we will see is we will see people doing some type of work, and we think, well, we know that they're only a smaller licensee, so how can they be doing that type of work? We've got information sharing arrangements with other organisations, etc. So we certainly have that.
Yeah, okay, great.
Sorry, I'll just clarify. It's 10% of your turnover, 20% of your NTA that you report to us. Sorry, apologies.
And Penny, in respect of that, request from June to update that document, our Director of Comms is already onto that. Hannah's just let me know that she's listening and she's already onto that right now.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Rick just said the calendar year or financial year numbers seem much higher if it is just for 6 months, which I think you clarified before around the number of forms being submitted under Notifiable Works, and more of just a comment on there.
It's calendar year, we've just been told, yep.
Yep. Suggest cross-referencing advertising media for maintenance plumbing with those that have lodged Form 4s and auditing the ones that haven't lodged the Form 4. So maybe that's something with the new technology that you're looking into that perhaps can be flagged as part of that process.
Yep, thank you for that. We'll make a note of that and put that into the data sets. Thank you.
June has asked, at creditors meeting, accountant advised that Cullens was insolvent prior to us signing contract, even though they had passed the QBCC's MFR whilst insolvent and prior to us signing contract. I'm not sure whether you can provide anything on that specific comment.
Sure. So as it goes back to a comment I made before, so I think it's fair to say that generally most people tell us the truth when they lodge documents with us. But there are occasions, and I'm not saying that this is the occasion for Cullen, but there are occasions when information that has been lodged with us is factually incorrect. Now, what we have to do is follow the law. The law requires that if somebody lodges something with us, we have to use that information to actually make a determination as to whether or not somebody is breaching the minimum financial requirements. So I think it's fair to say that the QBCC is aware number one, that people do sometimes lie to us, and we take very strong action in respect of taking action against both accountants and licensees who lodge false information with us. But getting back to the comments that both Kate and I have said earlier today, if we want to be an effective risk-based regulator, we need to actually not just rely on the information that licensees are giving us. We need to rely on a range of other information and data that is available, and that's exactly what we will be doing moving forward.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Brett. James just said, you're the man to fix things. I've been trying to sort this for 4 years. We are not builders. Start making some noise. Mark a separate section for plumbers. Just because it's the law doesn't mean it's correct and too hard to fix. Obviously, that's a policy matter, as you raised before, but thanks, James, for your feedback. I know how frustrated you are on this particular matter. June's also raised, annual reporting was a bit confusing. For example, I filled in info for the company, but had to do it for husband as he also holds a contractor license but only works for the company. Rang QBCC and they couldn't clarify. Well done for bringing back MFR. I think it's important for everyone's protection.
So thank you. I will. So every contractor license class, so trade contractor, builder, etc. So if you hold multiple contractor licenses, then yeah, you do need to provide that annual reporting for each license.
But it could just be $0 or $1 for that.
Yes, it could be. Yes, yeah.
And Patty, just for clarity, because I'm all about being transparent, it's important for me to say this. The QBCC didn't bring back in the requirements for MFR. That was through the Queensland Parliament and the Queensland Government. So it's important that I note that. And our role is to implement the laws and to administer the laws.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. James has said that the tempering valves replacement should not be a Form 4 replacement. Maybe that's more of a statement or comment from James there, and probably not something you could comment on at this stage.
Probably a policy issue, yeah. But we're certainly happy to let Housing and Public Works know of that statement, and that's something that they can consider.
Great, thank you. The next one's from Rick. It says, has a date been set to release the new Form 9? Probably not something that you could comment on.
No.
Housing and Public Works would release that new form. Yep.
Yeah, Ernie, did you have any comment on that one? You aware? No, okay. The Department of Natural Resources and Mines has asked to be informed of any Form 4s for gas hot water installations, so they can be proactive and make sure the plumber has a gas license. From the feedback I have, this has not been activated, so can you make this happen?
Happy to take that.
Yeah,
yep.
Kent, we'll work through that, whether or not we've got any ability to influence what DNRME are doing, but we'll certainly take it offline.
I think it's around, there was some sort of communication between the department and QBCC previously, just whether that's continuing or not. And
let us take that as an action, yep. And we'll work out where we are, yep. With that.
Kent said, I know they are keen, so that's great that they're keen to be involved.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I think I've asked all the questions that have come through on the chat. Does anybody have any other questions? I was just going to ask one other question, was just around what communication do you have with real estate agents and body corporates around ensuring that they are aware of regulated plumbing work and what is not regulated plumbing work, etc.? I know it's something we get asked all the time.
Yeah, thank you. So we have actually really increased our relationship, or we've got a great relationship with the REIQ at the moment. So September
not just at the moment, Assistant Commissioner. Always good relationships with stakeholders.
So in September last year, we met with the CEO of the REIQ to discuss improving compliance with matters regulated by the QBCC. And outcome from that was an agreement about that we would incorporate some of our content in the industry publication of the REIQ. So in the last couple of newsletters the REIQ has put out, there have actually been some articles with QBCC information on areas that we regulate, including in May an article about the sale of potentially non-conforming alternative toileting devices and the requirement for watermark certification, and emphasising the requirement for installation by a licensed plumber. So yes, we continue the good relationship that we have to collaborate with the REIQ, ensure that real estate agents and property managers are aware of the requirements to have a licensed plumber to do all plumbing work.
Okay, great. Thank you. I got another question that's come through. Large hardware chains are selling products to customers, but most of the time they are also instructing members of the public how to do plumbing work. How can we stop this from happening? And obviously I understand you've been in contact, as you mentioned before, about those signs that were going up in some of the large hardware or plumbing distributors.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Penny. Brett, you probably got something to add, but yes, we've been talking with and liaising with retailers around obligations, providing information and notices that they can put up in the stores. We've had, some good feedback from them around that. We've given advice to those retailers as well about the importance of in-store messaging by their staff and the importance of ensuring that their staff communicate to customers that, things like installing a new tap isn't a DIY. It is something they need to engage a licensed plumber to do in Queensland. So making sure that they're aware of that. We have been really focusing on that relationship to make sure that they understand the obligations.
I think it's also fair to say that, the plumbing products that we're talking about here are probably going to fit the definition of a building product under the non-conforming building product legislation. And I think it's important to note that every person in the chain of responsibility has an obligation to make sure that if they are selling or retailing something, that they actually have appropriate information about how that product should be installed, etc. So that's certainly something that Yvonne Pengelly and her team from a non-conforming building products perspective are certainly focused on.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. James just made a comment, so who can fix the law if it's not the QBCC? So that was just in regards to the net tangible assets. So obviously we'd need to talk with the Department of Housing and Public Works as they set the policy on that.
I think, anything around policy. So you're right, Penny, so far as speak with Housing and Public Works, but of course you could certainly speak to your local member as well, or through the MPAQ, ask for representations to be made.
Great, thank you. June said thanks very much to MPAQ and QBCC. She's found this very informative, so that's great. Kent's just asked, the people in the loop see the work that the QBCC completes on a day-to-day basis. Are there any plans to make the work that you do more publicly available so the licensees know what you're up to and what enforcement actions have been taken?
The answer is yes. We would love to talk more about the work that we do. We need to be very careful about how we do that. Yes, look, we certainly are very focused on doing that. We do use a range of platforms, social media, etc., and the QBCC website. So the answer is yes, we actually do want to continue to do more outward-facing work or communication. And one thing that we're also very focused on doing is, as we go through new programs of work, for example, the unlicensed data work that Kate is talking about, we actually want to be talking about that program of work before we do it, not dissimilar to other regulators such as the ATO, where the ATO regularly go out and say, we're going to be doing our audits this year on this cohort. It's a good thing as part of an ongoing education piece to let people know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and why we're doing it. It also helps people get their ducks in a row, for lack of a better word, to get compliance, because most of the time people actually do want to comply with the law. They sometimes just don't know how. So yes, the answer is we want to do more of that.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. June's just made a comment. Penny, I think James was referring to the tempering valve issue, and James, you've noted that I've got some homework to do. That's great, thanks for that. Apart from helping my kids with their homework, I will take that one on board as well. So the issue isn't around installing a tempering valve, because obviously you'd be supportive of that to make sure that people aren't scalded, but it was more around having to put that in the Form 4. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Penny, I might just also, I've just been reminded, we do have a quarterly newsletter about, that we've just started doing again. Hannah Rowe has just reminded us of that. So just keep an eye out for that. And of course, we're always very happy to talk about our work in, the MPAQ magazine as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I might hand back to Summer.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Sorry, thank you for taking over for me, Penny. I think that might be all the time we've got today. I think we've gotten through a lot of questions. So thank you very much to you, Brett, and to Kate for coming on board today and for taking the time to answer all of these questions that we've been receiving over and over again. Thank you to everyone that's joined in with us this afternoon and for submitting these questions to us. yeah, is there anything else you guys wanted to add in before we wrap things up?
Look, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Summer, for the opportunity that Penny and Kent have given us today. And, you know, we don't always get it right, but what we certainly try and do is make sure that we actually take the right action. So if there's any feedback that people can give us about how we can do better at our job, we're very happy to do that. I'll hand over to Kate, see if there's anything she wants to finish off with.
No, just to say thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to tune in and listen to us today, and hopefully you got something out of today. Feel free to contact us by the website, by email, by phone, if you have something that you'd like us to look into. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brett, and thanks, Kate. We do really appreciate and value your time today.
No problems. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.